So this year, 18, not 19, 2018 was a really big, good year all the way around for La Plata Electric. You'll see in reports that are coming, there was a very successful year in terms of financial and operational performance. Rates didn't go up. People at the co-op did a really good job of tightening the belt a little bit so that spending didn't go up. And all in all, really an excellent year of financial and operational performance is a tribute to them. We also have a great engaged membership. You might know that our meetings monthly, the third Wednesday, the first hour of the morning is where we welcome public comment, and we always have a lot of public comments. And it's a wonderful thing that we have people willing to take time out of their day, come to our meeting, offer their thoughts, and let us know what we ought to be worried about. And we appreciate that. We have engaged members. We have also worked really hard at moving further down the continuum of being more and more transparent. You know, we hear that from members. We know that in our own life, that we want to see what people in elected officials are doing and doing with our money and how they're making decisions. So this year, a couple big things. We started, and we're one of the rare co-ops in the country, we started live streaming our meetings. So you can click on a link on the LPEA website. If you want to watch the meeting live, you know, and I understand thousands of people do. Well, wait, maybe it's hundreds, but it's there. Based on what members have said as well, we tested out live streaming to make sure we had that down, and then staff was ready to start archiving those meetings. So if you missed it or you worked during the day or whatever, now if you want to see a certain section or anything else, you can go back in and click and look and see what happened in the board meeting. So as people say these days, you get to see a little bit of how the sausage is made, and it ain't always pretty. But it's good that you see that. So transparency is a big part of what we're about. We also just recently started posting, based on member requests, any donation or contribution that LPEA makes to any organization in our service areas. You can see where that money went and what it's doing. So, and we will continue to be more and more transparent. The third thing that we did this year is we, led by staff, we arrived at a common goal, you know, what I like to think of as a unifying goal, something that balances the significant interests that all of our constituents, all our members have. People care a lot about what power costs. People care a lot about the reliability of power. And people care a lot about the environmental impact of power. And you can mix those and people weight those a little bit differently. But everyone cares about those to one degree or the other. So we set a goal that said that we're going to strive to reduce our carbon footprint by 50% from 2018 levels by 2030. So environmentally conscious goal, but we're keenly aware that we can't do anything in that arena unless we also keep members' costs of electricity lower than 70% of its Colorado cooperative peers. So we sometimes get asked, would you do that at any cost? Anything at any? Absolutely not. We will keep our rates at or near where they are today relative to all the other co-ops in Colorado, and we'll pursue carbon reduction in all the ways that we can, particularly in efforts that we make and efforts that we can partner with Tri-State to make. We think that's a big goal, and we plan on your engagement to help us get there. Along with that, we've worked hard at making sure that we're leveraging our partnership and our membership at Tri-State. We can't achieve that goal without Tri-State. We're hearing a lot of things about their future intentions that are really encouraging, but we want to be an active, engaged member. Kirsten Skehan, our representative there, is doing just that. We're going to participate in a new contract committee based on a new bylaw that Tri-State passed, which may open up some more freedom to operate within the membership and the partnership in order to achieve those goals. So we want to be a good partner, we want to be a good member, and we want to leverage that as best we can. We've also had a committee this year that Mike will talk a little bit more about that was all about, you probably heard about the Power Supply Committee. And you know, some people love that, some people don't love that. But the most frank thing I can say about that is all about learning what's going on in power markets all around us in the West, so that we understand, as the fiduciary, in our fiduciary duty, we understand what the options are and what other resources and ideas are out there, so we can compare those against what we have. And so we are doing that in a methodical way to learn and figure out what other paths might be available in the future. I want to say the future is really bright at La Plata, you know, not just because of the lights right here, but because of the engaged members, because of the engaged board we have, and because of the super excellent 5-star staff that we have, I think that we will not agree on everything. We think of ourselves as a happy family, but let me ask you a question. If you come from a happy family, is everybody always happy? No, because you have disagreements. And the main thing we want to engage in is entertaining different ideas so that we can come out with the best ideas possible. And we want to fight over ideas, but not fight over personalities. And that's what we're in the business of doing as a board, and doing our best to serve you. And we appreciate everything you bring to the party to help make that happen. So those are my headline kind of comments. Again, I appreciate you being here. We'll have reports from other folks here, but I want to take a minute to say that Mike Drayspring, our CEO, has decided to retire. And he has served us incredibly well for 5 years. I can say in this year of working really closely with Mike, meeting really frequently to plan agendas and plan strategies and so forth, I've come to appreciate even more just how bright the guy is and how much he knows about the power world and how much we've benefited from his leadership. So I'd like to take a moment to recognize Mike for 5 years. His tenure with us will be coming to a close round about July 22nd when a new CEO will be taking his spot, but she will have big shoes to fill. So let's give Mike Drayspring a round of applause. All right, with that, let's see, we're going to draw a prize. I think they gave me notes to follow for a reason. Yeah, here we are. Ha. Ready? Go for it. Jeannie Bennett, who's in charge of all this, please go right ahead. We all work for Jeannie secretly, we know that.
There we go. Okay. So we just wanted to take you back to a little nostalgia. We used to draw all the time at annual meeting, and we've changed. The names will eventually be up on the screen. But we're drawing right now. We're going to do 4 in between the speakers. And we're drawing for the Nest technology that people signed up for when they came in, those that were interested. So you go ahead and read. Okay.
The winner for the Nest technology is Mark Garcia.
So with all the other door prizes, before you leave the table that's by the door, just go ahead and pick it up on your way out. Okay, Mark? Okay, thank you.
All right, and we have a winner.
Oh, would you like me to introduce? Yes. These are the La Plata County Fair Royalty for 2019, and I'll let Sydney the Queen introduce everyone else.
Hi everyone, I'm Sydney Brown and I'm the 2018 La Plata County Fair Queen, and I'll let my court introduce themselves.
Hello, I am Paige Porta, the 2019 La Plata County Fair Princess Attendant.
Hello, I am Bailey Capabo, your 2018 Lady in Waiting. Hello, my name is Audrey Roderick. I'm your 2019 Lady in Waiting.
All right, thank you. We'll have more of those as we go along. Next up is Brigham Wrinkle is going to tell us a little about Roundup.
Good evening. Nice to see everybody here tonight. So I am Brigham Wrinkle. I am the Executive Director of the Community Foundation serving Southwest Colorado, and also serve as the Board President for the Roundup Foundation. I work with nonprofits in Southwest Colorado every day to make the sector stronger and more sustainable. The Community Foundation brings in professional development, workshops, capacity building opportunities, which just is a fancy way to say that we bring in resources that help nonprofits get the job done. I can assure you that Roundup is a lifeline for both new and establishing nonprofits alike. Roundup supports more than 60 to 80 nonprofits every year that helps thousands of our LPA members. Let me take a minute to refresh your memory about the LPA Roundup. So Roundup is a community service program organized by La Plata Electric Association and funded by LPA members. Our members sign up to round up their electric bills each month to the next highest dollar. If you don't already round up, please make the move to round up today. You can raise to the nearest dollar with Roundup or add a few bucks, and with our Roundup Program Plus, you can add even more to our kitty. We have an information table up in the lobby, and we'll be there to answer your questions and for a quick sign up if you haven't already. The beauty of this program is its simplicity. Since Roundup's beginning in 1996, the fund has given more than $1 million in local grants and hundreds of nonprofits in Archuleta and La Plata. Individually, the contributions are small, but over time, those pennies really add up. So please join us. Thank you for your time this evening, and don't forget to round up if you already round up, think about adding a buck or two. Thanks.
So good evening. Make sure I'm on here. Good evening. It's good to have you guys tonight. One of the things that I like to do at our annual meeting is recognize the people who have served our country in some branch of the military. So if you have ever served in some branch of the military, merchant marines, and served our country, if you would, please stand up. We'd like to recognize you. And to you, I'd like to say thank you for your service to our country. A lot of us enjoy the freedom to do a lot of good things, one of which is working in a co-op and serving you that is purchased by the sacrifice of other people. I want to give you an update on several things about LPEA, in particular 2018 highlights. Our treasurer, Tim Wheeler, will give you some of the information about our finances. But one of the things you need to know, 2018 was actually, and you all know this, it was a really mild year for us weather-wise, but in spite of that, we saw our sales go up about 20,000 megawatt hours. Can't explain that, but that was in effect how things went for us as far as load this last year. That doesn't tell the story of the impact that the lack of snow had in our community, and you guys know this story as well. I mean, it was devastating economically to a lot of the businesses that we serve. It was devastating in other areas, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail. But it really showed the resilience of the members that we serve, because I feel like that we're on the other side of this. One vow I made last year was I will never complain about snow again. And I got tested this year, but I didn't. I was so grateful. We, as Bob mentioned, and Tim will tell you in more detail, we had a solid financial year in terms of margins and our financial performance. LPEA has done that historically. That's something that we expect to continue into the future. The 416 fire was, of course, the biggest event, and this was just one of the pictures that some of our line personnel took during one evening of the fire. Now, I got to tell you, this was my first forest fire. I've worked for 5 co-ops, never anything like that. And so the thing that and Justin Talbot will tell you, I was driving him crazy because I was saying, if we have a fire that takes out transmission line, how much can we rebuild with the materials we have? And that wasn't a good answer. It wasn't a lot. You don't replace a lot of transmission line frequently, so you don't keep those materials on hand. In fact, when you have to go look for those materials, you're probably not even going to get them from material suppliers. You're talking about gathering them from other utilities, and that was one of the things that we started thinking about. Well, our linemen were talking one day in the break room before they went out on the job, and they had this idea that one of the things that we could do to the 115,000 volt line, and that's that line that you're seeing there in that picture, one of the things that they said, if we cut in a switch in that line, we could in effect serve the north part of the valley from the north, and then the southern part of the valley from, Durango. And if we lose some part of that line, it's not going to be as devastating a loss. So we contacted Tri-State, told them what they were thinking. They asked us to wait a day because they had to start up one of their plants in order to support the voltage for that type of a change. But we did that. And I got to tell you, that was amazing. I started sleeping better after that. But it was because our personnel were thinking about how to solve a problem with that. And when Bob was talking about how fortunate we are to have the people that we have serving you, this is just one example of the things that they do innovatively to keep the lights on. One of the other things that we experienced this year, if you would have told me that we wouldn't have lost one pole to the fire that we had on the 416 burn scar area, but that we would have had hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses to mudslide, I would have asked you what a mudslide was. I had no idea what would happen after the fire. In fact, one of the things that I learned is that we're still dealing with some of the mudslides from the Missionary Ridge fire, 16 years later. That's really amazing, but it can tell you some of the devastation, and I don't know if you can tell, but that used to be a part of a transformer and some underground gear, and when that debris comes down, it actually will take underground facilities out. So we dealt with a lot of these types of damages as a result of the mudslide. I want to go back and talk just a little bit about, if I can get my, I don't know what I'm going to talk about if that doesn't come back on. There it is. Bob mentioned the Power Supply Committee. One of the things that we've been doing, Bob had the wisdom to establish a Power Supply Committee, and what he did was something different than anything that I've ever seen in my career. One of the things that he recognized that it's really important for our board and management team to work together because the management team has a lot of the technical knowledge, the board has a lot of that vision, but the board has very engaged, a very intelligent board. They were willing to invest the time, but Bob recognized that we had to work together. So he appointed 3 directors and 2 management team members on this committee and gave the management team members voting rights on that. And that was huge because it forced, I think, although I don't know that it was necessarily required for the people that were on the committee, a lot of collaboration. And if you attended any of the Power Supply Committee meetings, you know that we invested a lot of time and effort in studying basically 2 things because we were given a charge to do 2 things. One is, what's the value of the contract that we have with Tri-State? The other thing was, what are the alternative options that we have in lieu of Tri-State in the Western market? The Power Supply Committee was able to complete that work, and I'm going to go into a little more detail about that, but I really appreciated what Bob did to set this up. Bob has a vision for us in our board meetings to do more potential work through committees. This committee was successful in my opinion, and although its work is completed and the Power Supply Committee doesn't exist anymore, I think you're going to see more of that type of governance work. One of the things that the Power Supply Committee did was recommend that we set up meetings in all 4 member districts, board districts. And after today, Ron Meyer is going to start setting and scheduling meetings. We're going to try to have 2 in each one of the board districts where we come out and talk to you in greater detail about the consultants' reports, about what is the value of the contract and what are our options, because we have a lot of members that have concerns. Some that feel like that we should be exiting Tri-State quickly. We have some, though, that feel like that we shouldn't at all. And so there are concerns about rates, there's concerns about reliability, there's concerns about decarbonization and furthering renewables. This is what all of our members are telling us, okay? So we have a diverse set, and one of the things that we're going to talk to is what we've done so far and get your questions and comments and have dialogue with you to talk in greater detail about where we're going in the future, because there's still a lot of work to do before we get to the point of the board making some decision. Now, one of the things that I talked about earlier, I won't go into a lot more detail, is the contract valuation and the alternative market But I want to emphasize that any decision to exit Tri-State, that has not been made. It wasn't even considered so far. There is so much other work that has to be done right now that that's not a part of the process right now. So some people think that that decision has been made. It hasn't. And there'll be a significant amount more of work that has to be done, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, not just here, but at these member meetings, and I hope you'll come. If you're interested in knowing more of the details, and you have questions and concerns, we want to hear those, and we want to respond to you. Your input matters to us in how we consider this. Now, here are the next steps for the things that the Power Supply Committee recommended to the full board, and the board said yes to these 4 things. One of them is they've said, Mike and staff, we want you to go out and get indicative pricing for the Western market for LPEA's load. We had a consultant that came in and said, you know what? We see potential savings, over the tri-state cost. But that was a consultant giving us what she knew about the market, the power supply market. So what the board said is, if we're going to rely on that, let's go find suppliers and whether or not they're willing to sell at those range of prices that we heard from the consultant. So this isn't an RFP for alternative supply. What it is just, is there a supplier out there that's willing to sell power to us, and at what price? That's basically what we're going to be doing. In fact, we sent that RFI out yesterday. And we also included Tri-State as a recipient in that. The second thing that we learned, and we've been talking about this, transmission is a critical part of this decision. And one of the things that we had a concern about was, can we buy power someplace else? Because if you look at Tri-State's footprint, all right, we're talking about Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, and New Mexico. That's where their generation is. That's where their transmission is. If we were talking about buying power somewhere else, right, the question is, are we going to be able to get that power here reliably? We've answered that question. The answer is yes, we can do that. Now the question is, what is it going to cost is one part of that question. So the board said, Mike, what we want you to do is you and the staff go out and determine what are the additional transmission studies that we have to do in order to determine, can we get, say, power purchased somewhere else from perhaps partly of a wind farm or a hydro project or something else, can we get it delivered into LPEA's system? And so one of the things that we're working on right now is the scope and the definition of what those transmission studies have to be in order to get a cost, and we're going to report that back to the board. And this is all going to be, in open session. So I'd encourage you, if you want to know more of the details on these reports, come to our board meetings over the next several months. The member meetings I've already told you about. We're going to have 2 member meetings in each of our 4 board districts in order to talk about this in a lot greater detail than what we're doing tonight. And the last thing that they directed us to do is to develop a financial model. And a financial model that would basically say, okay, what do we think the contract's value is? What would it take to exit that contract? We've got those range of models that have been given to us, but that's a cost, right? And then the question is, what are the potential savings? Now, if it was just that simple, we could probably do it on a piece of paper, but the fact is, there are a lot of other things that we've got to take into consideration. We've got purchase power agreements with other distributed generation projects in our system today that we have to take into consideration. There's the issue about transmission, and there's some variables in that that are going to be a little complex and potentially, costly. So all of these things have to go into a model that the board can say, okay, what's the net effect? Or do we benefit financially, from doing this? That's what they've directed us to come up with. So those are the 4 things that we're working on right now. And I want to emphasize again, there is no decision. There's no decision that has been made to exit Tri-State. This is just something that we're going to continue to look at. I've said this a number of times. This is the biggest financial decision this co-op will make. All right? If you look back over our last 80 years and you look over our next 80 years, this is going to be a significant decision, but that doesn't mean that it should be avoided. I mean, one of the things, if we're going to do our fiduciary duty in serving you, one of the things that we have to understand is what are our options, what are the costs, and what are the potential impacts on you, the members. So I do look forward to your questions. We would ask that you hold your questions until then. We're going to have a session for your questions and comments that we'll address, and I appreciate you guys being here tonight.
Tim Wheeler's on his way up here to give us the treasurer's report. Do we want to do a drawing, Jeannie, before Tim gets rolling? Okay, we'll do two and get caught up, and then Tim will give you the treasurer report.
All right, we're going to do a drawing for a Roundup Plus 50-inch flat screen TV. And we'll do our drawing. Our winner is Catherine Elliott. And we have one more drawing to do. We're going to draw there's a framed print called Little Happiness, and it's by a local student, Serenity Wood. Ruth Guarino. All right.
So, hello everyone. My name's Tim Wheeler. I want to thank all our members for attending our annual meeting tonight. And I'm going to present the exciting treasurer's report. So, first, the co-op is in sound financial shape. All our financial obligations have been met. We've had a very clean audit report, and we have a sound financial position. From our annual report, you can see one half of the balance sheet. Here's the assets picture. Oops, that's the liabilities. I went too quick. So here's the asset picture. And you can see that most of it is in our utility and plant, the things that provide you with your electricity. And here's the liabilities and equity side of that balance sheet. We have managed very well to keep debt within key ratios that allow us to obtain low-cost financing, which helps preserve the margins that are needed and that get paid back to you, the members, through the ownership of the equity that we all enjoy in our operation of this fine co-op. You can see that the equity has grown. This is basically what you own as members. We all own the assets and liabilities that gets reflected in this equity, and which has grown in the past year. Through that equity, on an annual basis, we decide how much of the margin that we retire, and that gets refunded back to you as members. So you as the owners are able to enjoy that retirement. That's your money, and it comes back to you through this patronage capital refund. We retired $5.3 million in 2018, and over the life of the co-op, we've retired a little over $70 million. This is a chart that shows where our electric revenues come from, which classes of rates that are paid to us, and what they generate in as a percentage. You'll see that the majority of them come from the residential customers who, on average, I think around 674 kilowatt hours a month are used by each resident. Here's where our expenses go. Majority of it, 2/3 roughly, goes to buy the electric power that we distribute on your behalf. And most of that, all of it, in fact, comes from Tri-State at this time. It's important to note that, as others have said before, that we are making increased attempts to be as transparent as possible in our operation of the co-op and in our relations with the members. And recently, in the last few months, we've added additions to the website of information that I think, financial related information that we all believe is important for the members to have access to. So the board expenditures by director are there, as are the amounts on a yearly basis for donations and sponsorships. As Brigham Wrinkle said earlier, there's a lot of donations that come through Roundup, but there are other aspects that, of donations and sponsorships that La Plata Electric also provides. We have the annual Form 7, which is a form that details a report of both financial and operational data that's very interesting and useful, and you might want to look at that. It's like my report here. It's really exciting, and then we also have our IRS Form 990 tax returns, also a source of great information for anyone who wants to know more about the finances of our co-op. Whoops. So we also are a good corporate citizen. We pay a lot of property taxes on the plant and equipment in the easements and the locations that we own throughout the community. And between the two counties, you can see that we've paid more than $1 million in 2018, almost 1.3. So I want to thank everyone here, but I also really want to thank the great staff of LPEA. You know, I'm reporting on numbers that every day the staff do their work with keeping in mind that this is your money, our money as members. They take that very seriously, and they perform operationally very well to provide a financially sound business, all in the interests of us as owner and members. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we have a drawing. Yeah, great, go right ahead.
All right, for our last drawing, we have a $100 Visa gift card from Western United. And our winner is Mason Carpenter. Yeah. Congrats.
All right, very good, thank you. Do you have one more, or are we done? Okay, great. Thank you so much, young ladies. Appreciate that. Next up is Jack Turner. He's our CREA, Colorado Rural Electric Association representative and delegate.
Thank you, Bob, and good evening to all of you. I just want to thank you for allowing me to be in service to you and LPEA as your representative to the Colorado Rural Electric Association. And many of you know CREA through Colorado Country Life, but CREA serves a number of roles that are really important to the cooperative and all the cooperatives in Colorado. One really important service they offer us is safety and safety training of our employees, from administration to the linemen. And without that, and making sure we follow the necessary codes and regulations, and the ability to communicate amongst other co-ops to make things safer, it's a dangerous industry. And we have CREA to thank for offering that to us. Another role which I've been more involved with is both their administration, in which they've offered education to directors and employees, and also the government affairs. CREA is the lobbyist for the Colorado co-ops, and I have to say, being a Western Slope, growing up on the Western Slope, and knowing the geopolitics, where not only is it hard for our voice to be heard, but in this part of the state as well, it's doubly challenging. And so I've been on this board for about a year, and it has been really an honor and pleasure for me to be up here to introduce to you the executive director who has made it possible to for our voice in this part of the state to be heard. It's been, we've been heard, and we've made a difference, and we've been able to offer solutions, and rarely is that a chance or opportunity that this Western Sloper has had experience. So without further ado, I am really honored and I'm proud to have been working with Kent Singer, the executive director of CREA. He did come down to visit us and say hi, and please let's give him a warm welcome. Kent Singer, please.
Hi, everybody. It's always really a privilege to have a chance to come down to beautiful Southwest Colorado and get out of Denver for at least a few hours and see you all and see old friends and make some new friends. Jack really hit on some of the highlights of what CREA does, and I know you have a pretty good sense for that. But he mentioned sort of the education programs that we put on, and that's a very important function of what CREA does. We put on dozens and dozens of education courses for both co-op employees and co-op directors around the state. And through that, co-op directors can attain certain credentialed status through our national organization. So that's an important part of what we do. I was really glad to see that President Lynch and Jack also talked about safety, and that's an extraordinarily important part of what CREA does. We've got 5 employees who, that's their job. They're former linemen, former journeyman linemen who go around the state and train and work with co-op crews. And in fact, Dan Whitesides, who's on our staff, was here at La Plata LPEA all week, working with and meeting with your crews and doing crew observations, and that's a really important part of what CREA does. And Jack also mentioned the fact that we publish Colorado Country Life magazine, which you all get. That magazine has the largest circulation of any magazine published in Colorado. It's about 225,000 members, folks across the state who get Colorado Country Life, and hopefully that's a good communication tool for LPEA. The content is basically the same to all the co-ops, but the middle 4 or 5 pages are customized for each co-op, so you can use that as a tool to communicate with all of you. And then finally, Jack mentioned our legislative advocacy, and most of that is focused in Colorado, although we did just come back from Washington, D.C. Once a year. The co-ops all across the country get together and meet in Washington, and 3 of your directors joined on that trip, and we had about 50 or 60 co-op folks from across the state go back to D.C. this week and meet with our members of Congress and just express to them some issues that we had that we all agreed on that hopefully Congress could address. So I appreciate the LPEA directors and staff making that trip back to D.C. this week. On the state legislative scene, you probably all know this. Today is the 119th day of a 120-day legislative session. So as of midnight tomorrow, our legislature will adjourn for 2019. And did I hear a big woo-woo? I second that. It's been a really active legislature, very busy on a lot of important issues, and a lot of big bills got passed this year. There's been sort of, I think, some pent-up energy to get some bills passed, and some very ambitious and significant bills passed. In terms of energy bills, bills that would affect electric co-ops and the utility industry generally, there were bills on that topic as well. Probably the most significant is a bill called House Bill 1261, which sets reductions for carbon emissions for all industries in Colorado. And that'll have some significant impacts on your power supplier, Tri-State. Dwayne will probably mention that in a minute, and how it goes forward in producing electricity in terms of having to reduce its overall carbon footprint. And so it'll be very interesting to see in the next few years how that bill gets implemented. Basically, power was delegated to our Air Quality Control Commission to set up rules and implement that program. And CREA was involved with that bill, and you know, our job, we feel our job is to, one, try to defend the independence of electric co-ops and your ability to make your own decisions locally, but two, to watch bills to make sure that there aren't going to be additional costs that are related to power and your cost of electricity. So we worked on that bill a lot, tried to get some amendments made to it, had some success, some limited success on that. Again, we'll just kind of have to see how the bill gets implemented. But again, for the most part, I think it was a good legislative session. We had an opportunity to meet with a lot of new legislators, explain the co-op program. Pretty much every 2 years there's a significant turnover of legislators, and we have an education job to let them know who co-ops are and what we do. So that's been good this year. I think we've made a lot of progress in that area. So finally, again, I just want to thank Jack Turner. Jack's been a tremendous asset on the CREA board. Has been mentioned on the LPEA board. There are differences of opinion. Certainly when you get 22 distribution co-ops and 1 G&T in a room at CREA, we have differences of opinion, no question about it. But I'm very happy to say that all of our co-ops, I think, are trying to find a way forward that we can all agree with, and we have a lot of very interesting discussions in our boardroom, and I'm just very appreciative of LPEA's contributions to CREA, and I appreciate Jack's involvement on our board. And then finally, I just want to say I want to congratulate Mike Drayspring on his retirement. He's been a tremendous friend and ally of CREA. He's had a great co-op career. He's a tremendous co-op leader, and I appreciate all the advice and counsel he's provided to me over the last 5 years. So again, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for your support of LPEA and the support of CREA. Thank you very much.
Next up here is Kirsten Skehan, our delegate representative to Tri-State.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Lynch. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it. The active membership is really important to us. So I've been on the Tri-State board for a year, and I've been on the LPEA board for a year. So I've been really learning a lot. And one of the things I've learned is that governance is not really a science, it's an art. That most issues and almost all of our solutions are not black and white. They're in the gray world. The win-win is in the gray. The win-win is in the creativity. The win-win is in the passion and the compassion. It's in the ecology and the economy. The win-win is in our willingness to be wrong, and it's in our strength to be right with humility. So the black and the white, yes, they're there, but it's not just that. It's in that gray, and we have to work in that gray. And I believe that we are setting ourselves up to be able to work very successfully in that gray. So what we've got going on, very exciting times at LPEA and at Tri-State. We have a new CEO coming on. You'll meet her later this summer. Her name is Jessica Matlock, and very exciting, and she has a great staff to work with here at LPEA, and I think we're really going to see some things happening. At Tri-State, we also have a new CEO, Dwayne Hiley, who will be speaking in a moment. He requested to come down and talk to us today, and he requested to come down and listen to us today, too, and he's a great listener. If you haven't put your questions in, get your questions in so that you can have that chance. And Dan's waving that he's got things. And some questions might come up a little bit later. Go ahead, get your hand raised, get those questions in, because I really want you to have a chance to do that. So it feels to me that right now, black and white isn't working for us. We need to be working in that gray. And at a time when we need to find that win-win, I think you will find that as I have, that Dwayne Hiley thrives in that gray arena. In that spirit, please welcome Dwayne with an open heart and an open mind so we can create those win-wins together.
Okay, it is on. Good, 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 good. Kirsten, that was so eloquent. I wish that, right? I hope I can live up to half of that introduction. So thank you all for allowing me to visit with you tonight. I love coming to a co-op meeting. It just warms my heart when we can start a meeting with the Star Spangled Banner. I heard so many of you singing along. Fantastic. That's so rare. And it's especially important to me as I have a son serving in the Navy. Every time I hear that, it just brings me to tears. So thank you for sharing that this evening. I work for you as CEO of your power supplier. I realize that we are responsible for 2/3 of your power bill. And that's very important to each and every one of you. And that does not get lost on us as how important that is to the work that we all do, all of us at Tri-State, to serve your needs as best we can. So there are 43 member systems like LPEA that are part of the Tri-State network from everywhere from Nebraska, Wyoming, obviously Colorado, and New Mexico. So those systems that are served stretch all the way from the Montana border to the Mexican border. And it's a lot of diversity, as you can imagine. Just like there's diversity within your membership, there's diversity across that footprint. But there are some things we all agree on. And that's the importance of reliability and affordability, and then cleaner energy. And all those forces kind of compete with one another. Reliability costs money. Affordability, we all want to have the most affordable electric bill. And green energy can go either way, right? I love what Kristen said about the gray. We're in the middle of all that. We're trying to find that perfect solution so that we can all agree. Now, I want to congratulate you on the goal that you've articulated, because you've kind of captured it there. You want to be cleaner, and you have a standard you want to reach, but you also want to remain cost competitive. And that's the same challenge for us as a power supplier. Our priorities of reliable and affordable energy won't change, but the mix we use to create it will. And I'm in the middle right now of my career, 37 years, seeing the most rapid transition we've ever witnessed in the energy sector. And the way that energy is produced on the grid is changing like never before. And it's not just a green movement, it's now an economic movement. As we've seen the price for renewables drop and drop and drop, until now we can issue RFPs and we can bring energy into the network at prices lower than the cost of burning fossil fuels. So it means we're going to be able to, right. So that not only stabilizes rates, it actually helps to lower rates. Because the more that the sun shines and the more that the wind blows, those contracts we can sign at a fixed rate for 20 years. So that's a hedge against anything that would happen in fuel markets. It's also the way to help us reduce our fossil fuel consumption. That's all good stuff. You heard about the bill 1261 that was passed. Kent Singer mentioned it. It's going to be a new standard for the state of Colorado. It says that as a state, we're going to seek to get to a 50% carbon reduction by the year 2030. So that's just 10 years away. That's pretty fast in the power business. To move that quickly and change that much is something I've never seen before. And we'll all have to work together to get there. Because not only is that a 50% statewide goal, actually the part that the utilities are expected to bear of that is much greater. So as you think about the sectors in the state that emit carbon dioxide, some have more ability to control than others. Transportation sector has limited things it can do. Obviously, as we can electrify mobility, that will help reduce its emissions. But other sectors, industrial sectors, have limited ability to comply. When the Air Quality Commission looks at ways to meet that carbon standard, they're going to look to utilities to do more. What I've been suggested is that we'll see as much as an 80% reduction expected from the utilities. Now that means little or no coal left in the mix. As we look ahead throughout the state of Colorado, there are some communities that depend on coal production. Mining communities, areas where there's jobs involved. I don't know if that was applause in favor of the loss of coal or against, but see, that reflects the diversity, right? So we've got people that have feelings on both sides, but as we look at air quality goals that are set for the state and things that are in the public interest, we have to recognize that there are certain communities that bear the brunt of that impact. As I've met with our elected officials, I want to always remind them that we can't just think about the goal without thinking about the people who do pay the price in forms of jobs and community impacts, and ask them to remember us whenever that happens. So sometimes it's seen as a rural-urban issue, and sometimes the urban interests can say we just want to see it clean at any cost. But we know the people in the rural areas that we all serve, that LPEA serves, struggle every month to pay their electric bill, and that we have to be cognizant of the cost. That's why I'm so proud of your statement that you all made. You want to be cleaner, but you also want to do it and keep the costs in control, and we're in the same position. We want to be cleaner, and we want to do it in a way that keeps costs in control, but I think that is truly, truly within our grasp today because of the new and emerging technologies. Now, the mix matters, and the mix makes a difference. Today, if you're an electric cooperative member, then you get 1/3 of your energy that you consume is coming from renewable sources. And half of that, less than half of that's from hydro. The other half is coming from wind and solar. All non-emitting resources. So just imagine this. If you look in your refrigerator, you got a 6-pack of beer in there. Go ahead and have that first beer. Normal electricity cooled that. Second beer, normal electricity. But every third beer is brought to you by renewable energy. So drink up. Drink up. And it's just getting better every year. We have announced a new solar farm, 100 megawatts, a new wind farm, 100 megawatts. Each of these are coming online in the early 2020s. That will just continue to increase that percentage of green and renewable energy that's part of the mix. And as I mentioned, those resources come in at costs below the cost of burning fossil fuels. It's a win-win for everybody. Now, what can I say? But the mix does matter. So just like in your investment portfolio, you wouldn't put all your retirement money into Walmart stock no matter how much you believed in Walmart, or maybe you wouldn't put all your money in Amazon no matter how much you believed in Amazon. You want to diversify your retirement portfolio, right? So that if something happens to one, you're not all hung out. Well, same thing with the power supply mix. We want to keep a balanced mix of resources. So while we can get greener and greener and we can reduce fossil fuel consumption through the use of renewables, there's times when there's nothing like fossil fuels. And I'd refer you back to the bomb cyclone that we experienced a little over a month ago. During that episode, we saw winds blowing so hard that wind turbines stopped operating. And then when the wind finally stopped blowing, there was so much ice on the blades of the wind turbines that they couldn't resume operation. And during that same week, the sun wasn't shining because the skies were overcast, and we were only getting a portion of the solar output we'd normally see. So in those situations, it's really comforting to have a 30-day supply of coal on the ground that you can turn to carry you through that week until those renewables can restart. So that's why I say, when we talk about solar energy, and I believe in solar energy because of what it can do and the way it produces energy with no emissions, we should have a little billboard that says solar brought to you by coal. Because it's what enables it to happen. The two work together. And so you can't have one today without the other because of the technological limitations. Now, I understand about battery storage, and it's a fantastic technology. It's getting better every year. In my former job, we actually had a solar and storage development company and had implemented the largest battery storage project in the state of Arkansas. But it still has a long way to go before it will serve all the needs of the grid. Look forward to the day when that happens. Anyway, thank you all for listening so politely. We have a new bylaw change at Tri-State that's going to allow members like LPEA to have greater flexibility in your power supply options. If you want to go out and bid opportunities, those are going to be available to you. Maybe that'll be a cheaper option. We'd like to be a bidder in that process as well when you go out to look at that, and just wish you all the best in your future power supply options. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dwayne. We appreciate you being here. Next up is our General Counsel, Shay Denning, and she's got a report for us.
Thank you, Director Lynch. And before I get started on my report, I just want to remind everybody that we are going to be taking questions at the end. We're going to try something a little bit different this year to do written questions so that we can try to get through more of the questions and kind of answer everything. So Dan is walking around with sheets. If you have questions, make sure and get a sheet and write your question down before we get to the end of it so that we can try to answer everything. It's really good to be here tonight and good to see everybody. I'm getting to see some faces that I've seen before and enjoy being here and being part of this process. I can say that LPEA is served by an excellent staff and a well-informed and active board. And it's really great to be able to be part of that process and be here while you're celebrating your 80th year. Maine's Bradford Chips and Cheftel has been with you for more than 45 of those 80 years. As General Counsel, it's our job to provide legal support, any legal support that LPEA requires to effectively run its business. And that means that we advise the board on any legal issues that come up, and then we work with staff to carry out the business of the cooperative as guided by the board's directives. Last year, again, was a busy year for us as LPEA works to continue to position itself for the future because of the rapidly changing electric industry that it is facing, and looking at the opportunities that it has to position the co-op to deal with that change. And we've been assisting LPEA in navigating the legal hurdles that come with all of those changes that are happening in our industry. And we understand that with these changes comes a lot of uncertainty, and that above all else, the cooperative continues to be committed to doing what it always has done best, providing its members safe, reliable electricity at the lowest reasonable cost while being environmentally responsible. Some of the highlights of what our work has been this year have been participating in the Power Supply Committee and also in the Election Supervisory Committee. As you've heard, the board created the Power Supply Committee to study LPEA's options for power supply and, for power supply in the future. We assisted the committee in its task and with its goal of ensuring that the results that it obtained were reliable, accurate, and unbiased so that the board had good information to use going forward. The work that we did with the Election Supervisory Committee is something that I am particularly proud of. Several years ago, the board established an independent body that was made up of members of the cooperative to oversee the election process. And the goal with that was to provide an unbiased group that would make decisions during the election process so that politics didn't come into play. And it works. We've learned each year as we've gone forward that the election cycle presents its own unique challenges and it's never boring. And I've had the privilege of working with this group as they've matured in their processes. And I think that you can rest assured that the election process is fair, unbiased, and reflects the majority view of the members. And I would like to take an opportunity to thank the ESC for their work and their support that they provided to the co-op. Now, in addition to the internal focus that we've had, we've also assisted LPEA in its external focus and looking outside of its borders to ensure that it's able to address future challenges that are coming down the pipe. As a result of this work, LPEA has been able to strengthen its ties with its sister co-ops and to position itself to work for increased mobility as the industry changes. And as a result of that, there have been some exciting changes that have come through. I was privileged to be able to go up to Tri-State and participate in a member meeting that looked at making some changes to their bylaws. And that bylaw process, as Dwayne Hiley has alluded to, was successful. And from LPEA's perspective, these changes were made at Tri-State to create a potential opportunity for LPEA to gain increased flexibility to address future supply challenges. And we hope that the result of that will be not only increased flexibility, but something that can be good for the members as a whole and Tri-State as a whole. And on the other side of things, LPEA has also decided to participate in a case that one of its sister co-ops, Delta Montrose Electric Association, filed with the Colorado Public Utilities Commission. If that case is successful, meaning there is a good decision that comes out of that, there is the potential of providing an approved methodology for determining how a cooperative can leave the Tri-State family in a fair and equitable way to all parties involved. And we hope that the case is successful in providing certainty for the members so that other cooperatives know what they're dealing with going forward. Now, on a final note, I do say this every year, but it bears repeating. We want to encourage members to continue to take an active interest in your co-op because membership involvement is an important and essential piece of the governance of the co-op. And in order to do that effectively, you need to understand what the co-op is going through and dealing with and understand its governance process. And so I would encourage you, just like I have for a couple of years now, to go onto the website and review LPA's bylaws and policies. If you have questions about how the co-op is governed, what you can ask for, what you can do, that is a really good place to start to get information. I would also encourage you to, while you're there, to review the minutes and the upcoming agendas so you know what the co-op is looking at. And as has already been discussed, the meetings are now being taped and placed on the website. So if you're unable to come, then you can also go online and review the meetings that we've had to know what's going on in the co-op and get an idea of what's coming down the pipe. So in closing, I would like to thank the board and staff for the faith they have shown in myself and my firm for the past year, and for this continuing opportunity to serve as General Counsel for La Plata Electric. The lawyers at Mains, Bradford, Ships, and Sheftel are excited to see what this next year has in store for LPA and look forward to helping them navigate the legal issues as they come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Shay, and thanks for the great work all year and the great thoughtful advice you always give us. We have a little procedural thing here. We have a couple of items left, and as Shay mentioned, we're going to entertain questions. You know, we have a lot of endurance on our board for as long as you want. So, if you're writing down your questions, we'll be answering those after we give you the results here. The item on the agenda is unfinished business from last year's annual meeting. Does anybody have any? Good. Yeah. All right. So with that, I think is Tiffany here? I think we have election results to. We appreciate the work of Tiffany and her excellent staff, and provides a great level of quality and security and assurance. Thank you.
Good evening. So I'm Tiffany Parker, your La Plata County Clerk, and it's an honor again to conduct the election on behalf of LPEA. And I have your results. Okay, so the total ballots received was 6,633, and that's out of 25,416. So District 1, Holly Leanne Metzler received 1,106 votes. Michael Whitting, 794. Director elected for District 1, Holly Leanne Metzler. District 2, Dan Huntington, 1,751. Jeff Tucker Mannix, 727. Director elected for District 2, Dan Huntington. District 4, Jack Turner, 1,277. Sarah Farrell, 969. Director elected for District 4, Jack Turner. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you for that work. Thank you, everyone that ran for election. Thanks for the hard work out there and the dedication that takes. And we look forward to convening the new board at the next meeting on May 15th. I know there's board training and that sort of thing that'll be sent out to you, but results are in. We're all good. Next up, we're going to start the Q&A, and I'm going to ask Nadine, our terrific head of human resources here, to be our MC for that. And we'll do our best to answer your questions as candidly as we can. So here's Nadine Ontiveros, our HR Director.
No. Will this turn on? Thank you very much. All right, so thank you everybody for submitting questions. Just a reminder of how this process is working. I have handwritten questions and I've put them in categories so that we can get through as many as we can, and I'll address them to who we think is best to do it. We'll go through as many as we can. If we can't get them all, we're actually going to answer them all on the website, whether we get them tonight or not. So know that we really are glad that you're here. You bring up what your concerns are, and we'll go from there. All right, here we go. I'm going to start. If I turn away, do you hear me? Okay, good. I'm going to start with you, Bob. And our first question is, why have we not released the new CEO's salary?
Okay, is this on? Is that working? We good? Okay. We got that question, and quite frankly, several people, including our new CEO, wanted to release that number right away. Upon a little bit of research, our policy 108 says that that is confidential personnel information, and so in order to release that, there has to be a request to release that, and the board has to consider that, and that's exactly what we'll do on May 15th, and I anticipate that'll be released then. But we decided we had to follow our policy, and then we can decide to revise the policy in the future if we want to do that more. But those personnel matters are confidential, and we'll take that up on the agenda on the 15th of May.
Thank you, Bob. Mike, I have a question for you. We're lucky enough to have solar panels on our carport, and we power our plug-in Prius in the sun. And I recommend this to my friends. But if LPEA stays with Tri-State and its 5% rule, very few people will be able to do this in 5 years. Could you explain that?
I think that one of the biggest things that is driving the Power Supply Committee process is the issue over flexibility to be able to do this. And Bob Lynch and I went up last Friday to Denver, and we sat down and we talked with Dwayne, and I appreciated the time that he spent with us. One of the things that we emphasized was his need to understand it's not just about members' desire for renewal, it's about local and independent, renewable generation, and that's a critical thing. So the 5% limit has become somewhat of a barrier for us that has driven us to look at, options, to power supply. I don't have any doubt, based on the feedback that I got from Dwayne, that they recognize the critical nature of this. I'm not going to task him with some of the, just be real frank, failure that I saw happen with some of the ideas that, like Dan Harms pitched to Tri-State over the last several years. We've worked really in earnest to try to create that additional flexibility because we recognize how big a drive this is for our members. So I'm just going to take, in my answer, a little bit of time to emphasize to Dwayne that you recognize how important this flexibility is for us, and that this is going to continue. I think it's going to be extremely difficult for us to keep saying, well, that we've got this contract limit and 5% and we can't do any more. I really believe that our members are going to find a way, whether through battery storage or other options, to continue this deployment. Now, there are some other things that are a challenge that I want to talk about. One of them is the issue over physics. What happens when you have a rural area where you don't have many meters along a circuit that may be 15 to 20 miles long, is when you have PV in various places supplying excess energy, it can push the voltage up, and we have to stay within plus or minus 5% of 120 volts. So minimum 114, a maximum of 126. And one of the things our board is getting engaged on is, as we're dealing with that, are there things that we can do through our SCADA and through our automation, technology to deploy regulators, capacitors, and other devices in our system to reduce voltage in some cases to accommodate additional solar capacity. I do think that there are things that we can do technologically to create some headroom, and we have our engineering and our whole team looking at those types of options.
Thank you, Mike. That's a great segue. I'm going to ask Ron Myers, Manager of Engineering Member Relations, the next question. For those that are near the Falls Creek substation, why are they limited in solar capacity?
Hi. Hello. So one of the challenges, and Mike started talking about that is there's a couple challenges from a physics point of view that we're wrestling with right now. And one of the ones that we're starting to see is we're getting so much solar penetration, so much solar panels out on our grid in an area that it's not ready for it. If you think about how solar works, it generates when the sun's up. But how much energy is being used in the home when the sun's up? Most of us are either at our jobs because we have a boss that cracks a whip, or they're out riding and enjoying the sun. So that energy, when it's being generated, has to be used. The secret of the electric grid, it's the largest machine in the world. It's a machine that's in balance. And when it gets unbalanced, we start having problems. So we are having these areas that balance of load, what people using energy, is being overwhelmed by energy coming into the grid, and we call that grid hosting, and there's a lot more. It's a really nebulous term. There's a lot of other things to consider. So we do have areas, and if you go on to our webpage, we actually have a map that shows those areas. It's something we made in partnership with the vendors and helping them have a better understanding, so when they're being approached with projects, they have a resource to go to. But what are we doing about it? And that's the real question hitting here. We have just commissioned a study to look at doing what I call neighborhood batteries. This is not quite full utility scale batteries, but batteries being located maybe up in Falls Creek, where there's an area that there's so much solar right there. And a battery is an interesting being. It lives in 3 states. It can be a generator, it can be a load, or it can be nothing. And that's what's fascinating about a battery. So we are looking at maybe trying to figure out, could we put batteries out on our grid that become a load to bring balance back and then discharge that energy during the evening when people are there. It's not a simple solution. It's something we still have to understand. There's the consequences of cost, the consequences of technology. You know, if you look at the cost curves of solar and renewable generation, it hit the floor, right? Right? And that same thing's going on with batteries and understanding that technology today. So that's one of the things. And Mike talked about controls, and Dan and his team is looking at rolling out more robust communications that might allow us to get to a place where we can more dynamically control batteries. The other thing that we're doing today is we are updating our interconnection standards. We've been working with our vendors, and in that interconnection standard, the next evolution of that, that's really going to change our relationship with those people who want to install PVs and batteries. Because right now what happens is you contact one of our PV installers, or you choose to do it yourself. We do an interconnection study. We do that no cost to anybody. And that's where sometimes we have to tell those vendors that we don't have the room to take that energy. So look at maybe doing behind the grid, behind the meter storage, or reducing, or other things. With the new interconnection standards, that's going to allow that conversation to change, and we're excited about that. But there's a lot of work we've been doing. They've been modeled a lot on some of the rules that California has been rolling out. They're kind of one of the leaders out there. So that's my answer to the question.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Dwayne, we're going to stay. I have a question for you, and this is along the renewable energy. Would you consider other green power technologies such as biomass?
It's a great question, and I think I had a conversation earlier this evening with someone about a biomass potential project, Mr. Ford, I think it was. So obviously we're looking at any and all kinds of renewables that can help us meet those renewable goals that will be articulated for us. We especially like cost-effective renewables and those that help stabilize our prices. So if you got anything like that, bring it on. We'd sure like to look at it.
Thanks. Bob, why is LPEA subsidizing solar power?
That's a complicated question, and there have been a lot of studies about the effects of net metering and where the costs shift or not and all that. We have not arrived at a conclusive decision or conclusive judgment that there really is a subsidy. If there were a subsidy and we make that determination, then we would adjust rates because we don't subsidize. So it's still a matter of analysis and work that Dan and his team is doing to figure out what's really going on there. It's not a simple thing, but we don't believe there's a subsidy today. If we figure out there is one, we'll correct that with the rate.
Bob. Dwayne, I have another question for you, and this question is about lobbying. There's concerns about our rates that LPEA is paying to help lobbying that could be dismantling the Clean Power Act. How does that connect with your Renewable Randy campaign? How can you help with us understanding that? the Renewable Randy
Renewable
campaign.
Randy, okay. Thank you so much for that question. So I think I might have anticipated this question because I was expecting to hear something about the Utility Air Regulatory Group, and I think that's what's referred to in the lobbying thing.
Okay.
So one thing I know about lobbying is if somebody's lobbying on behalf of something you like, that's good. But if somebody's lobbying against you, you think that's bad. And, you know, lobbying is neither good nor bad. It's just expressing your opinion so that lawmakers can make the best possible decision. I thought it was kind of like this thing that I saw. How many remember the movie Wizard of Oz? Okay, so here's the plot summary for the Wizard of Oz. Transported to a surreal landscape, a young girl kills the first person she meets and then teams up with 3 strangers to kill again. Does that sound like the Wizard of Oz? It's an accurate statement, right? The first witch dies under the house, and then thereafter the Wicked Witch of the West. So I think that's kind of the way we can characterize lobbying. It's all in how you talk about it. But I would say this about Utility Air Regulatory Group. It's actually not a lobbying organization. That has become a little bit of a politicized tool in the discussions that have raised about that. My affiliation with Utility Air Regulatory Group goes back 30 plus years. And they were an organization of which we were a member that helped us to share information with other utilities on how the lowest cost method of complying with the law. So it wasn't to gut the law, it was to comply with the law. And I give you the example of the Clean Air Mercury rule that was promulgated by the EPA around just after the turn of the century. So mercury is emitted by power plants in parts per trillion. Most emissions are in like parts per million, and they're actually much easier to measure. But when it comes to mercury emissions, they're very bad, but they're in extremely small quantities. So when you try to measure parts per trillion, it's like a ping pong ball in this auditorium. You're trying to capture that. And the EPA promulgated the rule and said we had to control mercury as a utility. But the first thing we have to be able to do when we're controlling is measure. And the proposed rule was unmeasurable. We didn't have a practical method of measuring. So we used Utility Air Utility Air Regulatory Group to speak between us and the regulators. I saw the eyebrows go up, the slip of the tongue. But to speak with the regulators about how can we measure this in a way that's more cost effective, because what was proposed was going to be a very, very expensive way to comply with the law. And we agreed with the EPA then on a different method of measuring the mercury that was much more cost effective and still allowed us to meet the law. So that's how I see that group working. And in the instance of the specific issue with Tri-State's work in terms of the Utility Air Regulatory Group, we are under a data request from the federal government. We're going to be completely transparent to have all the records that they need, and I'm confident there won't be anything that implicates any wrongdoing on the part of Tri-State, but I think it might be used as a political tool in terms of this whole appointment process. But thank you for the question and for the opportunity to answer.
Great, thank you very much. Bob, I have a question for you. If there is a decision to exit Tri-State, how can members participate in this process?
Well, first, it's really important to echo what Mike said, is that there is no decision today to exit Tri-State. Certainly, what's gone on is a research effort to fully understand options and to learn and get smarter as a board. And as I've emphasized, at the same time, we feel very strongly about our opportunity with Tri-State and the new flexibility at Tri-State, and so we're going to work that really hard. Now, if down the road other decisions did get closer, then we would fully engage members. We'd be out in all the communities, we'd be talking to people, and we'd get everyone's input if we moved further down that road toward exit. We're not down that road now. So I want to say, I said that once wrong. I said, trust me, and I know that means, in today's vernacular, if you say trust me, it means I don't trust you. So we have to earn your trust. We have to earn your trust, and we'll do it with transparency and with information, and we'll engage everybody in here and all of our members all along the way as that learning and thought process goes on.
Thank you. And I have a follow-up question on the buyout for Mike. Mike, if LPEA was to pursue the buyout, where would the reliable power come from?
One of the things that we learned through the consulting study so far is that there are what are called ancillary services that are provided to us. Right now, those services are provided to us via our wholesale power supplier, Tri-State. However, the balancing authority that actually provides those is the Western Area Power Administration. The 6 ancillary services, I can't name them all, but they involve voltage support, frequency support, spinning reserves, supplemental reserves. Those are all of the things at a grid level, at a bulk grid level, that determine your reliability. If we were to buy power from someone else, we would still be getting those balancing authority ancillary services from WAPA. That's not going to change. That was the part that we learned that provided assurance to us that there would be continued reliability. Now, that's not all of the answer, but we feel like, in my opinion, that's about 95% of the answer. There's a little bit more research that we have to do on a few other issues about deliverability, but I don't have any concerns about the reliability.
Thank you. And Bob, the question we had the most today is how much is the buyout going to cost?
Gee, I wish I knew. We don't know that number. No one, I think there's a lot of computations different people could make, but the fact is we really don't know what that number is, and it's yet to be determined through many different efforts that are going on.
Okay, thank you. I'll stay with you, Bob, for another one. What are your thoughts on investing in team building for the board of directors?
Well, in my previous professional life, I used to actually do like team building and stuff, so I theoretically know something about that, but there's new challenges when you have larger groups and so forth. But I think, number one, I think we made some progress last year by agreeing on a set of norms as a board to live by in terms of how do you have a fair fight? How do you argue about the idea and not about the personalities? And so we established a set of norms that we try to live by, and we've done pretty good. I think we need to revisit that and kind of re-pledge allegiance to our norms and codes of conduct and that kind of thing. And then also I think I have an idea about us just trying to get together and spend a little time together, but not all about the business side, more about the personal side, and understand each other on a personal level, and I think that will continue to help us grow.
Great, thank you. I'm going to keep you on the hot seat. The next question is about conflict of interest. There's concern that there are members on the board, that there are conflicts of interest, and their decisions are benefiting their personal interests. Could you talk to that?
Yeah, I know that's been brought up by members who've come, and we understand that issue, I think, very, very well. We have a conflict of interest disclosure process where any of us that have any interest in anything that could possibly represent a conflict, we disclose that and we put that on a form. And then if that issue comes up, then we recuse ourselves from that discussion, or the board has a active discussion about whether or not that director should recuse themselves. We've had an issue come up with a director who had an interest in a company that does solar things. That director recuses himself from anything to do with that company should it arise at our board. So we have a pretty rigorous, we have a very rigorous conflict of interest disclosure process, and we manage that carefully. We rely on Shay for her advice. I think we've done a good job at that, and we'll continue to disclose and recuse if anybody has an issue that they're involved in.
Great, thank you. And I understand the board keeps each other accountable on the conflict of interest as well? That the board is committed to keeping each other accountable?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dan Harms, I have a question for you. This has to do with sabotage and the grid. What are we doing to protect our energy and our system, especially in light with 5G coming soon?
So most of those comments are probably in regards to cybersecurity, which is something we're, very much involved in. We want to watch it very carefully. We have a great team that's watching and doing everything that we can possibly do, and I'd say we're well above what industry standards would be in that realm. And things along those lines is that we have, like I said, that good team working those. And I wish I could tell you all the specifics of exactly what we do to do that, but then I'd be letting sort of the cat out of the box there. And so I can't talk about some of those things. But we do have great segmentation on our networks. There's no one single line of defense. There's multiple lines of defense. And so that's what we strive to keep forward.
Thank you, Dan. Shay, I have a question for you. There's a couple of questions that are concerned about residential status of directors and how is that being evaluated and is that fair? I know you did speak somewhat to that in your presentation, but there were enough questions that I think it would be really good to revisit.
Okay, thank you. So as I discussed in my presentation, we have an election supervisory committee that is responsible for reviewing candidate affidavits. And so whenever a candidate seeks a position on the board of directors, they fill out an affidavit that certifies that they're qualified under the bylaws. One of those qualifications is that they are a resident of the district in which they're running and have been for at least 180 days, I believe, before the election takes place. The ESC reviews those and reviews any questions that are associated with that residency. This year there was a question about whether or not a director was a resident of the district, and the ESC directed me to undertake an investigation to gather information regarding that residency. It then reviewed the information and interviewed the candidate, and the ESC voted unanimously to certify that candidate as being qualified under our bylaws. That's part of the process of what we have an independent body to do. And one of the things that it did and undertook a review very carefully. We spent numerous hours looking at documentation, looking at information, and asking questions.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question for you, Dwayne, and maybe you did answer this in the lobby, but there is what your thoughts are of Barbara Wolz's participation on the board. And you may have addressed that, but...
Just to clarify for the people who may not know, so Barb Walls works for Tri-State Electric, and she serves as a member of the Utility Air Regulatory Group. And so she is one of the people who's been asked to provide information in this query about the involvement of the potential EPA director in that group. And so she is cooperating with that. And I'd say on the advice of attorneys, I'm not supposed to say any more than that, other than that we're just providing all the information they've asked for.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bob, this is another question for you, and this is my last question. So we got through them all. That's pretty good. Good job, guys. If there is a decision to exit Tri-State, will the board ask for a vote from the membership, either through a special election or an annual election?
So again, that's speculating about a possibility way down the line that may or may not ever come about. But what I'm really confident in is that the board would never make a decision of that magnitude if a large majority, a plurality of the members didn't think that was a good idea. Now, whether we get that through public meetings or through some official ballot or whatever, I couldn't say what the board would decide at that time, but I know a board would never decide to make a decision of that magnitude if it weren't patently clear that a large majority of the members could see that as being good for them and good for their neighbor.
Turn the meeting back over to you.
Thanks, Nadine. Nice job. You distilled those 400 questions down into a pretty good pile there. All right. Thank you again so much for coming out. I know it's an evening, so I really want to encourage you to drive safely home, watch for deer on the roads. Look forward to the lights staying on and these folks at LPEA continuing to do a superb job that they do. And we'll see you on the next go-round of this next year. We are adjourned.